All right, guys, we're back with tier number 2 for our rookie running back rankings. I'm your host. Again, if you are joining and you're watching the overall video, it's going to be repetitive, but if you're just watching this one, I'm your host, Calvin Timms. Find me over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin. Co-host Dynasty Dale, Dynasty_Dale on Twitter. We just got through with our top 2 guys, Bijan kind of in a tier of his own. And I think that ultimately Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be in a tier of his own as well. So we're breaking out these next 2 guys into our tier 2, 1A, 1B for Robinson and Gibbs there. But starting off with our top guy here, and this is someone, you're going to get a lot of guys with these early rankings. There's going to be a lot of difference in people's rankings, and that's the number one thing I'm seeing. So, I've gone through, I've watched all the guys that I have ranked that we're going to be talking about with our running backs here, and I've gone through their stats. I've watched a little bit of the highlights. I haven't seen every single play. Usually highlights are only the good ones. They don't really show highlights of the bad plays. So, but based on what I'm seeing, my number 3 guy is going to be Zach Charbonnet with UCLA. And, the number 1 guy that everyone's going to put here is either Zach Evans or Sean Tucker. And we'll talk on those guys eventually. But, a lot of people are down on Zach Charbonnet, and I don't really understand why. So listed at 6'1", 222 pounds. He's a senior, so he's a little bit older, but he played for Michigan for 2 years, transferred after his sophomore year to UCLA, played 2 years with them, was supposed to be coming out last year, but recommitted to UCLA for 2022. Kind of shocked a lot of people. People really liked Charbonnet last year. He was a really highly ranked at least for Dynasty. People thought he was going to go pretty high, top 3 round running back last year. And, him going back probably was a good decision for his career. When you look at his stats, and we'll break them down here quickly, but it's very clear split, right? He's got 2 years at Michigan, 2 years at UCLA. Through Michigan stats, he had 168 carries through 2 years, which is not great. 850 yards, 12 touchdowns, only 14 catches for 71 yards, no touchdowns there. Doesn't have any receiving touchdowns at all in college, but UCLA over 2 years, almost 400 carries, 398 carries for 2,500 yards. He had 27 touchdowns, which is just massive there. But then this is the best part for Charbonnet, why I liked him going back. 61 catches for 518 yards. Now, that's over 2 years, but anytime you're a running back in college getting more than 30 targets or catches, I guess. I don't know the exact target numbers here, but anytime you're getting that many targets and catches, that's a good sign for the NFL. And, averaging 8.5 yards, it's not Bijan Robinson's 17 or whatever it was, or Jahmyr Gibbs' 11 yards per catch, but 8.5 for a running back is very, very good. And you couple that with the size of him and the highlights of him, he's a very good running back. He's probably the most stable out of all these guys. I think that what you're going to get from this guy. He's got upside, and he can be a true workhorse running back. There's no real flaws in his game from what I've seen, other than the standard rookie flaws. So the reason why I have Zach Charbonnet as my number 3 guy, top of tier 2 here, is just because I think that this early on specifically, not knowing a little bit more about some of these other guys, I think that he's going to be the safest one. I don't think he's going to bust at all when you get to the actual NFL, and I think that you're going to be able to rely on him for fantasy. Do you have any thoughts on Charbonnet?
I do agree with most of that. I will say that that for his first 2 years, like I did see him play at Michigan since I do watch a lot of Big Ten games. And he was really good. He was a very good runner. Like he runs north and south, which is honestly what you need in a runner. Like it's not good when you see a runner in college that likes to bounce outside all the time, because if you do that in the NFL, like you're not going to get as many yards. It's just plain and simple. So, I mean, I do think it was smart for him to go back to college for another year, to have some better numbers. Like he's probably going to go to the Senior Bowl this year, and he's probably going to shine there. I think the biggest thing that I see is that is that he's not a very good pass protector either, is a big thing. So that's probably gonna kind of hurt his stock maybe a little bit, and maybe not have him
Sure.
be in on like on the third down plays where he could catch those passes. So
Hmm.
you know, I think that's his biggest knock in his game is that. So
Sure.
you
And
know,
the one thing with that too, real quick, is just that's
yeah,
probably the number one knock on most rookie running backs. Like
yeah,
they just
yeah,
don't ever use these guys for pass protection in college. So if when you hear that, don't if you're newer to dynasty and fantasy football, don't worry about that too much. Most
yeah.
running backs when they're young suck at pass protection. They just are
Most,
terrible at it. So
most,
it's something that a lot of these
yeah.
guys learn. And when you're that big, 6'1", 220, you're going to be able to pass protect pretty well. You know, James Conner, great pass protector, right? That's who I'm
Hmm.
kind of envisioning here for Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah,
So, talent-wise, I showed a couple of highlights of him while you were talking there, but he's just very explosive. Very,
yeah. He is.
like
He is.
he's someone who reminds me of old school Leonard Fournette back in college, where he
Yeah. Yep.
embraces contact and he's not afraid of it
Hmm.
whatsoever, right?
Agreed. Agreed.
So,
No,
and he's big
yeah.
enough, right?
Yes, yes, no. No, I fully agree with that, and that's gonna help him be very solid for Dynasty. I think he's probably gonna fall down our rankings of maybe a spot or 2 because these guys may because some of these guys may have the more physical traits and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But overall, like, Charbonnet is a very solid running back. I can see him going in day 2 pretty easily, to a good team and and really contribute.
Yeah, he's like the perfect round two running back, like a J.K.
Yeah,
Dobbins from a couple years ago.
yeah, yep,
That kind of
yep,
range.
yep.
But yeah, we'll see. I think for the most part, we're probably gonna do probably three sets of rankings, I'm guessing. So we're going to do this one now, early rankings. We'll probably do one after the combine and, kind of update some of these guys, but then one after the actual NFL draft too, just to see the rise and fall of these guys. And, I think that he's probably going to be the most stable. Like I said, he's the
Mhm,
safest to me. I don't think, he's going to come to the combine. He's probably going to run like a 4.5, which is fine for that size. He's a big
mhm,
dude. He's not going to be that fast, probably. More than likely, it's all about the form anyway. Who really cares? But if he's going to be able to blow up the combine explosively, like we kind of expect him to be, I think that he'll be just fine there. So, the NFL draft will probably have the biggest impact on his placement in terms of final rankings. But again, I'm not really afraid of him going anywhere, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where he gets drafted. I think probably second, third round, right in that range, is where
mhm,
you should expect him. There's going to be other guys that we're going to talk about later that I don't have ranked up here that might really impress for the combine and their stats and everything. And I it might wow some teams. You didn't like my Georgia quarterback Stetson Bennett. Is that it? Yeah. You don't like my he wins argument, but a
no,
lot of these GMs are dumb, man. They fall for the
that's
flashy
true.
object. So,
Very, very
and
true.
that's what kind of
Yeah,
Sean Tucker is the guy that we'll talk on here soon, but um, he's going to be fast, and he's a former track star. He's probably going to run like
mhm,
a four. He could probably run a 4.2. He's that fast, but yeah, we'll talk on these guys eventually. But yeah, Zach Charbonnet, number 3 overall running back, top of tier 2 for me, going to be pretty safe. Now, the last guy I want to talk about here in my top 4, Kendre Miller with TCU. Now, Kendre Miller, he's a little bit smaller. He's not the biggest guy. Listed as 6 foot. He's listed at 220, but it's kind of deceiving. Sports Reference, if you ever go there for some player stats, they have him listed at 206. So he's somewhere in between. Let's call him 210 just as an average here. That's pretty good size, a little bit smaller, but by the time the actual combine rolls around, he might be able to pack a little bit of weight on there. But this cat is someone that I'm very excited about. I'm very high on Kendre Miller, probably a lot higher than other people, but this guy is so explosive. Oh my goodness gracious. So through 3 years at TCU, 361 carries, 2,410 yards, average is 6.7, pretty good, not the best. But this last year as a senior or junior, I guess his last year in college, 17 touchdowns on the ground, 16 passes through the air for 116 yards this last year. He's got 29 total, not the most utilized through the air, but TCU is not the best at targeting their running backs in general. They've got really good wide receivers over at TCU right now, so it kind of makes sense a little bit there. But when you watch this guy, and it did kind of stink because he got injured in the bowl game against, who was it they played in Michigan. Yeah, and I think when he went out of the game with the injury, he had like 5 carries for 55 yards. He was just tearing them up. He's so explosive, and that's why I love Kendre Miller so much. So he's someone that I think is going to be undervalued, but for me, he's probably got the best impact for fantasy football. He's going to be someone that I'm a lot higher on than the general consensus, which means that he's probably going to go late first. You know, he's going to be the George Pickens of this draft class, where extremely talented guy going to fall just because of other options, other shiny toys, right? Sean Tucker and Zach Evans, for example, those two guys specifically. But I think that he's going to outperform both of those guys. You got any thoughts on Kendre Miller?
I like Miller. I'm not as high as you are. You know, I feel he can be somewhat explosive, but I know he was playing against a lot of Big 12 defenses, and I don't have a lot of stock in those numbers that he has. So, I feel that he's a good runner. Like, he's a very good north-south runner. He's very, very good with the ball in his hands.
Yes.
I kind of feel he's probably limited in the routes he runs because of the offense that they run. So I feel he's going to be a decent running back, but I'm not sure how. I do have him a lot lower than you do.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really cutting a lot of like cutting hairs between a lot of these running backs because they are so close and lumped together.
Yeah, and I get it. Like I'm going out on a limb here, and just based on what I've seen from this guy, he's so good with the ball in his hands. Like, you get the ball in his hands, and he for his size, he reminds me of, who he really reminds me of is college Rashad Penny. You know, Rashad Penny always been super explosive in the NFL when he's healthy, and that's always been the biggest issue with Rashad Penny. Now, Kendre Miller, I did talk about he got injured, but for the most part, he hasn't missed much time with injury in college, so you don't really have that red flag there. But that's just who he reminds me of, and he's about that size. Penny was a little bit bigger, I think. He always has been a little bit heavier in the NFL, but Kendre Miller, if he comes in at like 215 to 220 to the combine, and he's as fast as he looks on tape, man. If he can run like a 4.45 at 218, he's going to make a lot of money in this draft. He's so explosive, and it really helps that TCU was able to go to the college playoffs this year and really kind of show that and showcase it and utilize him a lot more. Their team just feels a lot better this year than it has in years past. So I think we get to finally see that, but that is a little bit of a red flag against him, I guess, as well. The last couple of years, he's been good, but not great, right? But I think one of the biggest things, too, when you look at his usage, I think they finally realized what they had as well. That's the biggest thing because, as a rookie, he had 9 games, 54 attempts total through those 9 games. Very explosive, averaging 7.5 per carry. Last year, 10 games, 83 attempts, not really much of a change. But then this year, 224. To go from 83 to 224, that tells me that they realize what they have in this guy and that he's worth showcasing a little bit more there. So, that's a big jump right there, and I'm glad they were able to do that this year. But Kendre Miller, again, I think he's the George Pickens of this class. Very, very talented. Probably more talented than some of the other guys. Honestly, he's probably more talented than Zach Charbonnet, but I think that Charbonnet is probably a little safer. You know, that's the
Yeah.
only thing with him. So, but the upside for this guy, I want to put him in my top tier, like my top three. Tier one, you know, maybe 1B with Jahmyr Gibbs. Draft capital will have a big part of that, but, you know, I really like the down of this guy. So just something to think about. Again, you're going to hear all offseason, a lot of people are going to be lower than me, and I get it. You know, I'm going out on a limb here, but I'm planting my flag. This guy is just too good with the ball in his hands. He's Christian McCaffrey with the ball in his hands, man. You just cannot bring this guy down. So that's my thoughts on Kendra Miller. Anything else before we get out of here?
Um, I mean, it's with Miller. I mean, like what you said, like I just feel he's good with the ball in his hands, but I just feel I have to see more in that to really separate him from the others.
Yeah, and again, draft capital is going to be
Yeah,
huge for these guys
yes,
every
huge,
time it is,
huge,
and you
huge.
know when it gets down to it, and when rookie drafts come around, there's going to be a consensus. You know, there's going to be a consensus top couple guys, and you're
Hmm.
going to have an expectation of where these guys are going to go. For me, George Pickens was one of my top four guys. He was going in the early second round. That was great for me because that means I didn't have to
Yep.
reach on him. I didn't have to take him super high, and I still got a huge value. I love
Yes.
George Pickens over Sky Moore. I love George. Well, I did like George Pickens over Christian Watson. That's a little
Yeah.
to be determined, I guess. You know, after Aaron Rodgers is gone here, but you know, I
Yeah.
liked him over some of these other guys that were going in that draft class, and Jahan Dotson is another guy, for example, that I like George Pickens over. But we're just gonna have to see where these guys get drafted, how that consensus starts to play out, and then where the value is in your rookie drafts. But like I said, I want to get this out here now, get this guy's name out there to you so you can start watching these as we start going through the offseason. So that's it for tier 2. Anything else here before we move on to tier 3?
Nope.
All right, so thank you guys for joining us. We're going to take a quick little break here. We'll be back shortly with tier 3.